Hi, today we're going to talk about how enzymes and light energy power one of the most important processes in life, photosynthesis. We'll also see how this connects to how all living things, including us, get energy. So some of the things to expect. Well, we're going to have a note check, so be intentional and take good notes. We'll do a phenomena study check, a CER check, and remember, all of this content can and probably will appear on that upcoming unit test. All right, before we start the new content about photosynthesis, let's make sure that we're really firmly set with our knowledge about our older content, which is enzymes. So I want you to write everything you can remember that we've talked about and learned about with enzymes on a clean notebook page. Please label it enzymes, brain dump, so that you know this is information that you are recalling from stuff you've already heard in class or read about in the textbook. All right, so hopefully you have a full page of all the information you've learned about enzymes. And let's treat now as a bit of a quick review. Plug in any gaps you might have in your content that you just wrote down. If you are missing it, now's the time to add it. So, enzymes are biological molecules, they're proteins, and these speed up chemical reactions. Without them, reactions in our bodies and plants that they rely on would happen too slowly. They're involved in digestion, respiration, and obviously photosynthesis. So remember, enzymes are specific. We've talked about that lock and key model before, where each enzyme is like a lock and only a specific substrate the key can fit. This is why enzymes don't react with just anything. For example, Rubisco only reacts with carbon dioxide. The place where the substrate binds is called the active site, and if the shape isn't right, the reaction won't happen. So hopefully you have all that information. And if you don't, take a minute, let's pause right now and turn and talk with a neighbor. Make sure that your notes and their notes are the best gosh darn notes they could possibly be. So for our anchoring phenomena, or our phenomena study that we're going to do, each group is going to have a cup, it's going to have water, it's going to have pieces of green leaves in it. And we're going to take turns exposing this to artificial sunlight, and then we'll see what happens. So this is something you have encountered all of these ingredients before. You've encountered leaves and water and sunlight and fake sunlight, but we're going to combine them and see if we notice and wonder anything interesting afterwards. So just because I've done this before and I'm the one who planned it, you're going to see little bubbles form. My prompt to get you thinking, to help get your brain going, is why do bubbles rise from the leaf when it's underwater in sunlight? So that's your jumping off point if it's hard to get started. But every group is going to take turns and you need to do some really good I notices because you're observing. That is something that we don't often get a chance to do, these very direct observations. So we haven't done a lot of that in this classroom yet, but we're going to get more and more experience doing that. So I expect to see some really good I notices. And I want to see more than one. So we're not going to be lazy today. We're going to do at least two. If you can do more, that would be perfection. But on the wonder side of things, I also want you to start going beyond just one. Don't take the easiest route. I want you to really let your brain think through some things. So intentional, mindful. We are aiming for some really good ideas and content here. All right, so this is what your notebook page should look like. You should maybe have phenomena study. Maybe you're going to draw a diagram of what you're seeing in front of you. But remember, we're doing these phenomena studies because this is really where you're starting to think like a scientist. The I notice is the observation sign, and the I wonders are where your curiosity is going to kick in. So it's not a time to be lazy. We want to really expand what we've been doing. So the goal today, more than 2 I notice and more than 2 I wonders. I want you guys to expand and keep doing more things. So now that you've had a chance to do your I notice, your I wonder, and we had some of that interaction with our specimens and the artificial sunlight, I'm hoping your I notice and I wonders are maybe similar, maybe they're even better than this. Honestly, that's what I want. I want you guys to do more and think beyond where even I'm limited. So hopefully you have some really good ideas on your paper. And if not, this is a good chance for us to pause again. And I want you to do a turn and talk with your neighbors. So talk to at least 2 people, not just your best friends, but if they happen to be somebody you are friendly with, that's fine. But really expand your horizons. See what other people are thinking. We finished our phenomena study. We've talked to some of our people in the room, getting some of their ideas. Maybe we've even adjusted our notebook to reflect what we've discussed with our classmates. So now let's do a dive into some of why we're doing this and some of that foundational content that we need so that we can be as successful as possible. So what is photosynthesis? And this is not a trick question. I know you have been learning about photosynthesis since elementary school, but we're going to go a little deeper with the content than you have in the past. So that means that we need to make sure our foundational knowledge is really well established. So photosynthesis is how plants take sunlight and turn it into energy in the form of glucose. It's going to be something that happens inside the chloroplasts, and it's how plants feed themselves and produce the oxygen we breathe. So here's the balanced chemical equation for photosynthesis, and you've seen this before, probably in 6th grade. Plants take in carbon dioxide and water, they use sunlight, and with the help of enzymes produce glucose and oxygen. Enzymes are essential to each step in this process, and that's why we had to learn about enzymes before we learned about photosynthesis. So our light-dependent reactions, this is the first stage of photosynthesis. It happens in the thylakoid membranes, and it requires sunlight. That's the light-dependent part of all of this. This is where water molecules are split, they release oxygen, and that energy captured is stored in molecules like ATP and NADPH. And enzymes are what make all of this possible. The second part of photosynthesis is called the Calvin cycle, and this happens in the stroma of the chloroplast. The enzyme rubisco grabs carbon dioxide and helps build glucose or sugars using ATP and NADPH created in that first light-dependent stage. So we've been using a lot of vocabulary, and we want to make sure that we have the definitions for any vocabulary that we might not be as familiar with or that we might be not getting correct often. So let's lock in these key terms that will help us understand the full process. These are foundational definitions. That's why they're on this page. So if you don't know them or if you're missing them, now's the time to put them in your notebook. So we start with enzyme. That's our protein that speeds up a chemical reaction. Substrate, the molecule acted upon by an enzyme. Active site, that's the region where the substrate binds. So that's where you're going to have your enzyme and substrate come together at the active site. Rubisco is an important enzyme that's in all plants, and that's an enzyme that fixes carbon dioxide in the Calvin cycle. We have ATP, and that's an energy molecule. NADPH, that's an electron carrier used in the Calvin cycle. Glucose, this is sugar made during photosynthesis. And chloroplast, well, that's just an organelle where photosynthesis can take place. So why are we learning about photosynthesis? Well, this is the why does it matter part of it. The glucose or sugars made during photosynthesis, it's not just plant food. It fuels every living organism on Earth, either directly or indirectly. Remember learning about those trophic levels? Well, plants are at the bottom of that trophic pyramid because everything else relies on plants. So whether you're a carnivore, eating an herbivore, that herbivore only survives by eating plants. So if you eat food, you need photosynthesis to be happening because it keeps all life on Earth living. So now's a great chance for us to pause and check on our notebook. Are we taking notes? Are we having gaps in the notes? So let's pause. We're going to do a turn and talk and see if maybe your neighbor or somebody nearby has more information than you do in your notes. Or maybe you have more complete notes than somebody else and you can help fill in gaps in their notebook. So we're going to pause and make sure that we are intentionally filling out our notebook to the best possible degree we can. So here's what my notes look like at this point. And it's okay if your notes don't look the same. But one thing I want to make sure that you guys are including is we've mentioned the Calvin cycle. We've mentioned Rubisco. We've mentioned enzymes at play within photosynthesis. We've talked about 2 different stages of photosynthesis, so we should probably make sure that's in our notes, the light dependent and the Calvin cycle, because that's content that you should expect to see on a unit test, and that will come faster than we all want it to. So make sure you have your definitions. Maybe you've drawn some pictures to help you out. Maybe you included some questions that you'll look up answers to later. So now's a great chance to make sure your notes are as complete as possible. So we've talked about enzymes, we've talked about photosynthesis, and soon we're going to talk about cellular respiration. Well, cellular respiration is really neat because it's something that both plants and animals do. So you and I complete cellular respiration. Plants can as well, in addition to photosynthesis. So I like to end this unit on cellular respiration because it's something that both plants and animals do. And all cellular respiration is, it's the process by which organisms convert glucose into ATP, usable energy. And it happens in the mitochondria and it relies on glucose made through photosynthesis. So if you're an animal, you have to eat something to get access to this. So herbivores are going to eat plants, carnivores are going to eat the herbivores. Remember our trophic pyramid? So we want to make sure that we are aware of photosynthesis, and from photosynthesis, we can build our foundational knowledge about cellular respiration. So we're going to wrap up like usual with a CER, claim evidence reasoning. And here I want you to explain how enzymes make photosynthesis possible. You can use the phenomena that we talked about today with the plant, the leaf, and water and being exposed to artificial sunlight. You can use your notes, and you can also pull from any class information that's provided to you, either on the YouTube channel, the class notes I give you access to, the PowerPoints you have access to, your textbook. So I would suggest that we stay away from just doing Google searches for this. Really try to rely on your own notes, your class resources, that type of information. But if you need to go to outside sources, that's fine. But let's start documenting when we do that. And it doesn't need to be a formal documentation because we don't need to be to that point yet. But if you get an answer from Google, maybe write down the website name, or even if you do a little note saying, I asked Google for this, just to start seeing and tracking where we're getting our content so that we are able to process our information and maybe be like, hey, I'm relying on looking up a lot of stuff, and I know we covered it in class. So that's something that I can use as a teacher to help drive instruction. Maybe I'm not covering enough. Or maybe you as a student, you can be like, hey, maybe I'm not paying attention. Maybe I'm not taking my notes intentionally enough. Maybe I'm not even looking at my notes. So this is something that I want you guys to just start doing. So start tracking where you're getting your information, especially with your CERs. So make sure that your evidence is not the reasoning, because those are two different things, and make sure your claim is not just a restating of what I've put down here. I want you guys to start really broadening out and expanding what you're doing with these. Again, it shouldn't take you a long time. 10 to 15 minutes should complete this simple CER. All right, if there's any questions, please let me know. Cannot wait to see y'all and see what you guys have done when I do those notebook checks. All right.